Yeah, this movie was really different. But before we sort of get into that, man, let's just talk about freaking, reflecting a little bit on a time which almost feels surreal. Looking back on it now, man, this is a reminder to everything which happened. And interestingly, this was obviously, before COVID. So, another part of this. But man, what did you how was it watching this kind of movie like now?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a interesting experience watching this now compared to if you had watched this pre-COVID and you weren't from Kerala where this had actually happened. Like it would have at that time been kind of just a hypothetical thing that you can watch at a distance and be like, that's interesting. I'm glad it didn't happen in my country here in Australia. But having gone through a pandemic, everything just is so much more heightened when you're watching this. There were scenes here that just hit me really hard, man, just because, not that I experienced severe COVID or anything, but hearing the stories that happened during COVID about our hospitals being overwhelmed, about families being torn apart, this has kind of a renewed force, I think. And I'd love to hear the experience of people from Kerala who watched this and how this would have felt at this time, right? And on the back of a pandemic. But I think you're just able to appreciate the implications of what's going on with this Nipah virus so much more when you understand kind of the medical health professionals trying to grapple with this and figure out solutions really quickly. And you begin to understand the day-to-day lives of the people who are affected by the virus and these kind of flow-on consequences of the people around them as well. So everything just happens with a renewed force, I think, and it feels so much more real. There are parts on this where I was definitely triggered, man, and it felt too soon to be thinking about viruses again. And look, I didn't even experience anything that bad, to be honest. But I think another really interesting perspective is we've gone through COVID and we obviously knew about the impact on healthcare professionals, right, who are at the front line of this. But this movie really brought into sharp focus the work that healthcare professionals were doing, right? Obviously, Nipah is different to COVID, but how hard they had to working around the clock, not just the doctors, the state officials trying to manage the outbreak, the risks that all the healthcare professionals were undertaking, how they had to be separated from their families, constant state of anxiety about whether they're infected. I think you just understand the frontline workers and how they were impacted, and you have so much more of an appreciation. I think we always understood during COVID that they were really affected, but seeing it kind of in the day-to-day and from their perspective, it really brings into really sharp relief, man, just how heroic those medical professionals are working in these fields. So yeah, man, it's a lot to unpack. And I don't envy people in Kerala who had to deal with this and then a pandemic on the back of it.
No, and before that, I think there were floods as well. So yeah, they've definitely gone through quite a bit. The people from Kerala. So I hope there's nothing gonna come up now. Hopefully there's a sense of peace.
Touch wood. Yes.
But yeah, man, this movie was, as you said, it was pretty triggering just to sort of have that. I mean, there's a huge sense of anxiety and sort of like stress all the time, and that's what it really felt like during especially the early days of COVID. Right? It was. So much like that. So this movie did a really great job of just like the tone is from the start. I think they never really give us a chance to really have a break or a breather. Like some movies like this, they would sort of give you a bit of introduction to the characters, and they might be really lighthearted and stuff like that, and then go into sort of the side of like now it's outbreaking. But this takes us to like no, we start at the point of when the virus has just been detected.
The first person comes. Yeah.
So it's basically like you're in that sort of zone with them, and we're sort of back in that zone with sort of everyone else with that.
Yes.
And you're right, it is really interesting to see all the different people involved and sort of getting a close glimpse as to what they have to do. I think it's good because during COVID, during that time, I don't know if that was highlighted so much because it was so much about, numbers and controlling the spread and, the policies that they put in place.
100%.
At least here, that was a focus. We never really got to hear so much from
that was the focus.
The frontline workers. We maybe hear from like like the Department of Health in like a press conference or something like that. But you actually see like the team which was in charge of actually trying to figure out how to control this. It was pretty interesting. But yeah, it's just it was definitely a bit of a challenging watch. I will say it's very serious as well.
Yes.
So, it's something that you just like, as it should be, which is, I credit them for making a movie like this because it's such a challenging endeavor to just make a movie that's so matter of fact and so, it's not glamorous at all. It's just completely straight. This 100%. Is how it was and this is how we acted.
And so in the memory of people in Kerala, because this movie came out basically like a year after the actual event, right? So it's all in recent memory as well. There hasn't been kind of time to digest it. And obviously it wasn't as bad as COVID in terms of the spread of it, but it's still fairly recent. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't. The spread wasn't as wide, but you saw like, the sense of like fear was probably much more.
Fear was
because like
huge.
It was such a high fatality rate. So, luckily it didn't get to too many people, but I'm sure people from Kerala must have been, especially around these areas,
panicking.
Wherever Nipah was, it would have been a sense of panic because, the movie did a really good job of just showing us how, serious it was, I thought, by one, showing us a few patients that have gone through it, but just that, the unknown factor. Like, we also had that. Like,
that's the terrifying part.
Nothing known about it. And the movie did a great job of trying to figure out what this thing was.
That's right. It really transported you back to like the early days of the COVID pandemic where no one really knew what the right thing to do was. The government was just putting in place policies and figuring it out as it went. There wasn't a sense of like, this is under control. Yes. And so we as ordinary people affected by it just have a sense of like helplessness. We're just following directives from people who are kind of making it up as they go because it's such a novel thing. And it kind of, really took me back to that time of, we don't know what's happening. No. We kind of hope things are under control, but we're just waiting to hear from health professionals in the government about what they're doing and what we should be doing.
Yeah, and how it was just on the news cycle the whole time. It was just like in everyone's conversation. It was all the talk. It's all anyone really talked about for at least a year. It was just like, consistently just checking and updating. And that's what, it felt like that these people were going through. Obviously, it probably showed more towards the medical side of things than the actual personal side of things. I think it did show that as well, very well, through the people involved within the team. But it didn't take us to like the people from outside of the team, for instance, except for like the ones connected to any of the main team members.
The infected, the team members, yes.
Correct, yeah. But it's different, man. Like,
when are we? Yeah, go on.
I was going to say like, because Nipah was pretty different, right? So I was just trying to think like, with COVID, there was always a sense of like, at least we knew that the fatality rate was not super high and it was like not the worst.
Yes.
I think Nipah must have been so much more scarier.
Yeah, because I think they were saying that Nipah virus has somewhere between 40 to 70% death rate. COVID has less than 10%.
Yes.
Like that, that is how terrifying it is. And that they don't, so it's concerning.
And even like the way
that's the last thing.
Like, even the way they showed some of the people like getting affected by Nipah, I thought it was pretty.
Yeah.
Like I don't think anyone, at least I didn't see people from COVID getting seizures or anything like that. But maybe I can't remember too much about the really bad symptoms, but they didn't seem so intense. Like this movie sort of showed with Nipah, like people vomiting and then it's like they almost just instantly
the confusion. They go into coma sometimes. And it all happens very quickly. Yes. That's the terrifying thing, right? Between infection to passing away, it's a space of days by the sounds of it. And when you couple that with the fact there's no vaccine, no acknowledged treatment, there's just a sense of like helplessness to everyone involved, the doctors, the person infected, and all of that. It's pretty terrifying, man.
Yeah, no, it's pretty. It is. I think we'll talk a little bit, man, about I think the main thing that sort of struck me and probably yourself as well watching this cast is just like how many people.
It's like who's who here.
It's like the party basically, man. Everyone's invited. This movie was just like an ensemble cast if I've ever seen one, man. Like just from the start, like I didn't see the cast beforehand. I knew it was ensemble cast, but like for instance, when I see Jojo George show up, I'm like, what?
What? As essentially a side character. And we've just watched like 2 movies where he is the central character. In one time, he's playing a twin. He's that good.
No, exactly right. All these characters, everyone, like, even probably, I don't even know who the biggest star would have been or who had the most screen time. I think it might have been the
Who's
Doctor.
the draw? Yeah.
I think he might have had the most screen time. The guy from Bisham Parvam that we saw. Srinath Pashi. He might have been the most had the most screen time.
Yes, he was. I
definitely
quite
don't think
a lot.
he's the biggest star.
No.
I think when we got people like Tovino Thomas, obviously huge name, and Kunchako Babu, Kunchako Bobin, sorry, and as I said before, Joji George and Asif Ali. There's a few pretty big names in this, and they all have small screen time. Names. But man, how do you? We sort of mentioned before recording, like it's kind of nice we're seeing this now because we've seen a lot of these faces, whereas before it would have just been unknown. But how was that whole experience of watching these different people show up?
Oh man, it was so good. And reiterating that it's so good to watch this with a bit of background in Malayalam cinema and these actors as well, because it's just a joy to see them on the screen playing also very different characters to how we've seen them in the past. But in terms of the ensemble cast, man, it's hard to think of a bigger ensemble cast than this in terms of star power, right? Yeah. In anything we've watched in recent times. So that was amazing. And I think what's really impressive in this film is that no one is like overacting or has big monologues or any really dramatic scenes, right? Shobhan Shahir comes close to having kind of the big scenes, right? And that's a welcome relief, I think, at that point in the film. But everyone is very mellow and understated, and it's just so different to how I've seen him. Like Tovino Thomas in Talumula and what's the other one we've seen him in? Minal Morali. He's like a charismatic guy, full of energy, funny. And here he's just like a very straight-faced state public servant trying to manage the risk from a government perspective. It's so different, but it's also just exactly what you need for this role. You've got Joji George, who's not throwing people around in a room or being imposing and scary for once, and instead being a loving family man. It was so great to see different elements of different perspectives on these characters and knowing how versatile each of these actors are. So that was an absolute joy to watch. Just how understated all of the performances were, man. And that's one of the hallmarks of this film. It never goes for the really big kind of emotional outlets in this. It is all very understated. Everyone is acting very real, and there's underlying sense of just rationality and realism to their work that I really appreciate. These guys weren't trying to be movie stars. They were trying to do justice to the characters they were portraying, who in some instances were real life characters who were dealing with this epidemic at the time it happened. So this is a different side to all these characters, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. No one put a foot wrong in their performances.
No, you're exactly right. It was very matter of fact kind of movie, and they ensemble cast really played to that. Like you're right, nobody except for probably Shobhan Shahir, who came out and was a little bit unhinged, which was definitely which was
the way I like it.
Definitely a sort of sense of relief. I mean, he absolutely killed that role. He probably had the most. He probably had the most dynamic role, especially compared to everybody else. But even his character reminded me a lot of sort of during COVID, sort of some of the antics that people sort of would get up to. People would look down upon. When he sort of grabs a drink from everybody and it's
so.
Yeah, definitely, man. But I did like that. You're right. Nobody really had any. Like, because the cast was so spread across, nobody really stole the show, it felt like, even like
100%.
So many character comes in second half and he's more like a character, but the main team, like you get a sense, like, I guess it did a really good job in showing us this was a real team effort. It's not like this is the leader and then here's number 2, here's number 3. No, everyone has their own specific role, their own specific place, whether it's the government officials or the media or the doctors themselves. They all have their own part to play, but no one is above each other. It felt like. So it felt like it was very sort of balanced, which I really sort of appreciated, because it could have easily been like, Tovino Thomas, you're a superstar. Give us a big charismatic speech towards the middle to rile the troops up. And
precisely.
Get us all excited. But no, they didn't keep it like that, because that's not how it would have happened.
would have played out. And you know what, man? I think part of this film or the creators of this film, the director, writers, I think they tried to not only create a successful film, but really pay their respects to the people who dealt with these viruses in real time. Like the people who, in recent memory, the nurses who had died trying to save patients, and the doctors who had identified the virus, found the index patient, figured it all out, stopped the big spread. I think this film is a dedication to them, and it shows that in the end credits. So I think they were trying to be respectful. They were trying not to over embellish things. I think the film does say that there's some bits embellished, but they were trying not to go too far because they were really trying to show how these were very reasonable people trying to solve these issues in real time and really just do their justice to give their, props to these people who had to deal with a lot of stress and did it so well. So I really respect the filmmakers for, showing respect to the frontline workers who had to deal with this.
No, definitely. It was a lot of respect to everybody involved with this whole situation. And this movie did a great job of representing that. It is almost like, a thank you and a tribute to the people that obviously, unfortunately, was lost during this time, but also all the hard work and all the people that are involved to get, them through this really tough time and do it in such a way which, prevent loss. But I think I enjoy like the complications that they sort of have to go through. Like we got to really see, not the physical complications, like the actual the challenges that they had to sort of go through, right? Because we had 100%. Moving into the storyline a little bit more, like basically, like we had stuff like contact tracing, which was like a big buzzword.
Yes, huge.
COVID too. Contact tracing and lockdowns and all these words. Quarantine, isolation, our favorite COVID words. But essentially,
COVID buzzwords.
But they did have a lot of challenges. Even like George's character, right? Like it was kind of like, I think he was like the head of the cleaning unit or something like that.
Is that what he was? Yeah. Okay.
I think so. And like at the start, he was talking about a contract getting renewed or something like that. So I think something like that. So then like the challenges of actually getting people volunteering to sign up. Because this is not like, it's, as you said, worse than COVID, right? If you get it, you get it.
Yeah.
But the challenges with that, then the challenges obviously with getting supplies, as I think Tovino Thomas's character talks to, as I mentioned, Prithviraj's brother, this Dr. Babu Raj, basically him, to get the PPE and the masks and everything like that. There's cool moments they had where it was like, because there's no celebration. No one's like running around the room, jumping around with their hands up. It's a really small thing, but like when Tovino Thomas' character is basically just talking to them like, look, we got, he's cool, call somebody, we got these PPE suits which we couldn't get, we got these masks, it's a miracle, and it's all done like with complete silence. No one's celebrating because it's like, this doesn't mean much. The virus is still out there.
But it's still out there,
But how did you sort of like this whole 100%. Challenges that they had to face, man, and the way they displayed this stuff?
I really liked it.
Yeah.
I thought that was one of the best parts of this movie because it felt like you were dealing with the issues in real time, right?
Yes.
It didn't the virus didn't happen and then you fast forward 10 days and they're still trying to figure it out. It's first patient comes in, something's weird with him. He's infected. Next person's infected. They realize what it is. What do they do next? You're solving these problems in real time with them. And so you're getting a real granular insight into the problems that these individuals are having to solve and the stress they're under to solve it as quick as possible. Yep. So all of the real life problems of getting PPE, doing the contact tracing. There's even kind of great scenes about not even just the medical side of it, but the kind of public humanity side of it when I think one person says, can we not burn the body, please? Can we do a burial instead? Both for religious reasons, but also because they want to see the deceased person one more time before their body is kind of incarcerated. And, is it the Kunchako Boban character who's he's a doctor, but he understands and he goes, oh, maybe we can do a deep burial thing because that worked in the Ebola crisis in Africa. And so let's try that here. And so they're solving not just the medical emergencies, but also like the public side of things, because the public needs to be managed throughout all of this as well. And it's not just about the medical risks that need to be managed. And then you had kind of the random national security risk of biological terrorists or something. And I thought that's probably not a necessary part of this film, but those conspiracy theories exist, right?
Yeah.
How many COVID conspiracy theories existed, right? People believing it was some sort of a biological attack, that it was deliberately manufactured. And you need, like, that's a public sentiment you have to address. You can't be blind to that as a government. And so everyone's grappling with it. So I just really loved that, getting into the minutiae of the day-to-day of these officials trying to work through every problem as they arise. Because this, like COVID, is a novel situation. This virus has never appeared in India before.
No.
I think it's appeared in like 4 or 5 countries. You can count it on one hand. So no one knows how to deal with it. And you're just working with these really committed, intelligent people to try and make the best decisions they can with the information they have. And I found that thoroughly enjoyable, man. It's a perspective we never got in COVID, right? Because we're not in the rooms with these people who are trying to solve these mysteries in real time. We just get a press release saying, wear a mask, stay 1.5 meters away. You don't know how they arrived at those decisions. So I found that part really, really insightful and really entertaining, surprisingly entertaining.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. That's probably, as you said, that's probably my favorite part too, to just see that. And the different sort of, as you said, the different streams that they have to go through. Part you mentioned about the burial one was really interesting because it's like we could see even of this movie, it packs in so much because they're doing so much, but even in that, it's still somehow able to flesh out that entire challenge from start to end.
Yes,
because we see how I think it's Tovino Thomas and Jojo George are basically the two that are trying to coordinate how this is going to be done. So I think while there's some issue with the cremation center or something like that, because the fumes come out and that's going to be an issue or something like that.
Can't be done.
And then so I think Jojo George, he says that there's some people in front of him and he's like saying, I need to get the police in. And Tovino Thomas is basically saying, no, I don't want to cause any issues with this. I signed you to do this. Of course,
yes, another great one.
Another great thing to be like, you want to, make sure you're not causing any unnecessary hysteria.
Don't create hysteria. Yeah, exactly, that's right.
So I did appreciate that. And like the end was basically like, they solve, it's like solution one was to burn the bodies in I think it was open fire, which was kind of heartbreaking to sort of see that, but that's how things were sort of happening.
Yeah.
Until they get to the solution later on, which was like with Kunchako Bourbon to be like, let's bury them. So I don't know how they managed to fit in all this into this. This is a subplot within
fascinating concepts. Yeah.
It's a very small part about the movie, but somehow they've taken the challenge and fleshed it out so much where it feels like it itself could have been like a whole storyline, but it's only given like maybe 10 minutes of screen time and they're able to do so much.
And it still feels like it's explored thoroughly. Yeah. It's not just kind of a footnote. It is, you engage in the conversation and it's resolved and it doesn't feel too quick. Yeah.
No, exactly right.
Man.
And they also, when you mentioned about the conspiracy theories, look, I'm happy they didn't stray away from that because look, that's not something to, I'm not going to lie, man. Like when COVID was first happening, I think I was in the office and me and one of my close colleagues, we were actually literally looking up whether this was a bioweapon or something like that. We were borderline convinced that this might be something else because
some sort of attack.
Yeah, we were trying to figure it out. Be like, we were like, we can't rule this out. Like, why couldn't it be?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, so I'm happy they didn't stray away from that, and they sort of upped the stakes. Right, it got to the point where the journalist says like, you have a week to basically figure this out, or else the defense ministry is going to
defense department's taking it of it.
They're going to take over the whole project. I'm not sure if that actually happened or not, to be honest.
No,
but for the sense of this movie, I guess it gave it sort of more timing, I guess, and more pressure for them to figure it out.
Yes, a bit of a deadline.
The other part I really liked about this whole way the storyline plays out is like, it's almost like the first half is like them figuring out like what this whole, the whole mystery behind Nipah is and how to deal with that. And sort of the second half, I think elevates it a bit more faster, or maybe the middle half, when really the character of, and also shout out to this actress, Parvati Rivu Dr. Anu, the reporter.
Dr. Anu,
the journalist. Yes. I've seen her in another movie and she's fantastic in that as well. But in this, she was like, I thought she was fantastic. It was like her journey to sort of, she was at the center of the contract tracing journey, I think, to figure out where this come from. I really enjoyed how they showed that, patient comes in here, this person touched, this person touched, this person touched.
Yes.
And they have to sort of figure out where the people are and how it was like a mystery. But
that's right.
Did you enjoy that side? I think that was probably more.
I loved it, man.
Yeah. What do you think?
I enjoyed that. I'm about to say I loved this part of the film the most as well. So I love all parts of this film by the sounds of it. But the investigative part of her and the Kunchako Bourbon character, where they're kind of looking at videos. She's looking at videos to try and figure out how everyone is infected people are connected to the index patient.
Yes.
And then they both go out in the field and start talking to people who are friends of the infected people. They start examining their rooms. They look at the wells. They look at the forests surrounding their homes, and they're you follow them on this like procedural journey, yes. Right? Medical procedural journey, which I found that really fascinating, man. Just firstly, you get out of that hospital environment, which, by that point in the film was a very sterile environment. Like you start the film with it being emergency ward full of people, just everyone coming in, doctors just milling around, going from one patient to the next, to once they realize it's the Nipah virus, everything's cleared out, sterile. There's only a couple of rooms used and it's just for the infected people. It's a different environment. So it's good to go out into the public and see what's going on. And that also lends itself to some beautiful scenes with some of the infected people's relatives. There's a heartbreaking scene where the index patient's mother is like, is my child going to be hated because he's the index patient? And Kanchagababan doesn't really answer the question, but we all kind of know that he will be blamed for it or whatever. But that hit really hard. But yeah, where they're out in the field doing the actual investigations, really enjoyable, man. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And it just shows how many pieces there are that you need to get right to contain this virus before it gets out further. You not only need to do the contact tracing, you need to find the original source and like contain that source and make sure it doesn't get worse. And and then manage the public's perception around that as well. Like it's huge, the amount of things that had to work for the outcome to arrive at where they did, where people died, but it could have been far worse.
No, exactly right. I like you. I really enjoyed the whole process. It was probably the most exciting, I think, because it felt like that probably had the most traditional storyline where we could actually follow, like, oh, okay, like this is happening now, and this is happening now. Whereas the other stories felt like there were more subplots going in all different directions as to how we figure out this issue, and have interjections of different, people coming in between. But that one felt like it was the most sort of linear, just like, we can follow this one path from start to finish once it really gets ramped up.
Yes.
So I did really enjoy that side of things. But I also did enjoy, like, as you sort of mentioned in between as well, like this movie didn't stray away even while it's going on that journey to sort of bring us back to reality and to show us, like, the impact that it had on people's lives in between as well. Yeah, like, the death and
that's right.
Every single character, like even they had an old man who's there, and like I'm not sure what the relationship between him and there's another man who kept looking at him. They didn't really flesh that out, but the small moments.
The doctor, right?
Yeah. I think that the doctor, and he was just like basically they were just like I don't know what the relationship was, but you could tell there was a lot of heartache between a lot of these people involved, and like I think there was another character who had a fight with his wife before, and there was an abortion. Asif Ali's character, Vishnu. So, you could sort of just tell how that was plaguing him. And the aspect of guilt as well was a big one. With the character of the doctor, played by Srinath Basi again. Who realized that, he kissed the girl before or something like that. And then that could have been, that's the reason she got it. And he's just heartbroken over that, man. So it's like,
devastated.
I was really enjoyed how they sort of, because like, it could have just gone into like, let's go into adventure mode. Let's just figure out the storyline and forget about what's happening. But it kept pulling you back to be like, here's another scene showing you another side of things, and it's not going well here.
Yes.
So, yeah, man, it was well done in that it was
100%.
It was linear, but at the same time, it always broke you off it to just pull you back to reality. So, credit to this movie for just
I think that's right. That's the scientific aspect was so interesting and the investigation was so interesting, but it never forgot the human side of the story, like the impact on people and the relationships. And you got a little bit of backstory to all of the people who are infected and the doctors and nurses as well. So it was done with a lot of care, and you never really, as you said, forget the human impact of this virus on people. And I think they got the balance absolutely right there, man.
Yeah, definitely. It even in sense of before we sort of move on to sort of some comparisons and some criticisms that we might have had in this movie. I did say like ending of this movie as well. It's a small scene, but I think it was also pretty well done with the bat at the end.
That was such a beautiful touch, man.
I thought that was it's like so. It was like, this is such an innocent act he's done. It's nothing.
Yes.
Like no one's prepared like a meal with this bat or something crazy like that, or fed it to somebody. It's nothing sinister or anything like that.
It's an innocuous event.
Exactly. It's so innocent that nobody would ever think anything of it. It's just he's seen a bat on the road who's been injured. he's taking a picture of it, and then he basically moves it. But just that one touch, and that's enough to create all
That's
this.
right. And a touch of generosity or like sympathy for the creature.
Yes.
And that's what spawns it. It doesn't seem fair. It wasn't an act of brutality that he had, or like someone has eaten the bird or whatever. It is, he's trying to help this fruit bat who's been injured, and he puts it back lovingly in another place.
Yeah.
And that's all it took, which is scary in a way, but also I think somehow beautifully done as well. That moment really did strike me as very effective.
It's interesting to put that at the end. I just thought it was like I think it might have come up. Maybe it was the very last scene I remember. I don't know if they showed credits and then it came up.
It did. It was a post-credit scene, essentially.
It was essentially a post-credit scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty funny considering. I guess the only ensemble cast that we compare with is probably the Marvel Avengers movies. So this is like true. The Avengers of the Nipah virus, I guess.
Nipah virus Avengers.
But that moment really hit me because it's like, oh wow, that's what caused all this. Oh my god, it just puts it all into perspective, right? Like man. It's I think it was a really perfect kind of ending, and it was definitely the ending was definitely uplifting, and I thought it was well done to just sort of see how that all played out. We didn't mention sort of the connection as well, how it's sort of Sobin's character did have he causes more confusion because it's like, how did this guy get infected?
How did the link to the index patient?
And again, that was another journey in itself to be like, how did this guy connect? And for the reporter to find that out, that was also a fun ride as well to go on to see how that's sort of tying the pieces together. Because potentially that could be extremely scary if they didn't figure it out. Then
because that's another cluster.
Yeah, that's another cluster. Apparently, they would have.
That's a new index patient or something, and you need to repeat the process for that.
Exactly right. So
that's. I mean, the sense I got watching this, and maybe people in Kerala didn't feel this way, is that it could have been really far worse. Like they contained this to a couple of cities, and they were able to trace the one person it all related to. Like if that person had crossed the state border, or it had gotten any worse, oh man, that could have gotten bad very, very quickly. But they credit to the medical health professionals and the people working on it that they sorted it out quickly and took the right measures to contain it.
No, it was really like it shows you they really emphasized how quickly you have to act in these kind of situations.
Yes.
Because we saw them, get the super team together inside the house or whatever it was to basically solve it straight away. So yeah, you're right. It could have gone really, really bad, really quickly. Just one, again, innocent event of maybe going on the train, on a crowded train to go visit somebody.
Yeah, good point.
Something like that. But they seem to manage it pretty well. But yeah, man, overall, man, I did definitely enjoy this movie. It had a lot to sort of think about. Did want to talk a little bit about, because I know the movie that we're going to get really compared to is probably the movie Contagion. There might be an opportunity to talk a little bit about the sort of how Hollywood might have sort of done this. Obviously, it's like, what are your thoughts, firstly, man, about how you think Hollywood would have approached that? Because something this might come out in a few years about COVID. To be completely honest, it's not.
I'm waiting for the first COVID film. Yeah. It's just no one knows exactly how it started still. So looking forward to who's brave enough to tackle that.
Correct. Yeah, but how do you think Hollywood done this?
Good question, man. I mean, I haven't seen Contagion, so I'll be interested to hear your comparison with it. I think the immediate thought I have is that it wouldn't be done in an understated way, such as this.
Yeah.
Right? It would be more kind of hysteria, people on the streets going crazy, the White House on the phone being like, we need to shut everything down, like the president's dying, or like all very heightened emotions and very, very dramatic and very sensationalized, which I think there is a time and a place for that, because it is obviously creates a very tense film then that's very enjoyable and keeps people on the edge of their seat. I prefer this type of film, to be honest, because this is the part that I find most interesting, seeing how people react to it in the day-to-day. And I think the director of this film, I'm not sure if we've seen anything from him before, but the director of this film, I think, made a very conscious choice to depict this film from the eyes of the medical health professionals and the frontline workers, not from the perspective of an ordinary person realizing that this pandemic or this epidemic was about to occur, or just from the perspective of a infected person, because that would have lent itself to a very different sort of movie, I think, because then you have maybe elements of hysteria, people losing it when their loved ones die and all of that. And I think the director deliberately shied away from that, maybe because, you know, this is based on real events, so they can't embellish too much. And also because, I don't know, they want to pay homage to the frontline workers. But I definitely think if Hollywood were to tackle something like this, it would have been far more heightened emotions, a lot more sensationalism. You would have had the government side of things, the medical side of things, the people side of things, the conspiracy side of things, all the boxes ticked off, but in a more sensationalized way. So, I mean, that's how I think Hollywood would deal with it. But yeah, it's hard to know, to be honest. But I'm glad that the way this director and everyone involved in this film handled this, the understated way, really affected me, and I think had the right impact on me in terms of appreciating what people went through during this outbreak.
Yeah, definitely true, man. Director Ashik Abu, we've not seen anything from him. But
Ashik Abu, right,
yeah,
okay.
It's really interesting point how Hollywood would compare to, obviously, you know, the Malayalam film industry would approach it. I think it has to do with a lot of the audience as well. Because when you're saying, like, you know, Hollywood would approach it much more sensationalized, because I don't think this approach would have really sold many tickets if they were to do it like this potentially. Whereas I think maybe the people from the Malayalam film industry, whoever sort of fans of it, must sort of just know that they keep it real, they keep it authentic, as we keep repeating on almost every episode.
It's a good point. So they keep it real.
They're sort of used to seeing something like this. So essentially, sensationalizing something like this would have almost been offensive in a way. If the
good point.
Totally would have done it. So there is a bit of that, which I think might come into play. The only thing I think Hollywood might do it as, because I don't think this would be a movie. I reckon Hollywood would have turned this into like a show. It would have been like an 8-part series or something like that, I think. Which is, I mean, I prefer movies in general to shows because, you know, I think they're better. Movies like this can show us that you can actually write a good script and convey all the ideas in a efficient manner, whereas shows always have the fear of being like 8 hours, 10 hours to tell us about a point, which could have been done in a smaller time. I think Hollywood might have gone with the approach of making it a show. That's one thing. Actually, while you were talking, it reminds me of another movie, which I don't know if you've seen. It's called Marginal Call. And it's basically...
I've seen that.
It reminds me a little bit of that.
About the financial crisis.
Right? That was all matter of fact in how they were doing it.
100%. I thought of that film actually while watching this.
Yeah.
Hilariously. Yeah. Because serious stuff was going on and everyone was just dealing with it as a matter of fact and knowing the severity of the consequences, but they were just doing their deals. Yeah.
But I mean, the difference was I think Marginal Call was like an epic like flop. It didn't make any money. Whereas this movie, I think, was really, really successful, which tells you like if a movie like this can be so successful, it's a pretty big testament. I think it was one of the highest grossing movies in 2019. So they definitely made their money back. But I will talk a little bit on Contagion because I have seen it. Again, I'll give you just some references, man. I watched it in 2011, so my memory is a little bit faded. I did a little bit of reading to refresh myself about it. I think I watched it when it came out on DVD, so that's a while ago. But yeah, I mean,
what is a DVD?
Pretty much, yep. Those discs. But essentially, I don't know, man. Like, it had a lot of similarities when I was watching that movie. It's different because obviously I saw that movie before COVID and before going through an experience like this. So everything's fiction. Whereas this feels like, you know, even though I didn't live through Nipah, like having watched COVID, having been through COVID, there's obviously some parallels which I can draw on. But again, also some parallels. Obviously, the ensemble cast in that movie is also huge. Matt Damon, I think, being the lead. But aside from that, there's a lot of faces that just keep coming in and out in that movie. But they also keep it pretty... It's, again, from the perspective of the medical profession in a lot of ways. It is quite sterile. So they do actually go towards like authenticity and realism as well. Again, I don't think this movie was a super successful movie. So again, it might just speak on that point you mentioned before where like Hollywood wouldn't do this kind of thing again because both Marginal Call and Contagion were both, I think, critically acclaimed, but didn't make much in the box office at all.
Yeah, the audience wanted something more.
Yeah. So I think there are some pretty similarities. I think the biggest difference was the fact that Contagion was like a pandemic. So similar to COVID, whereas this is an epidemic, which is like just localized, this small town. So I think there is much more, they look at the whole global aspect of it, whereas this one doesn't at all.
Yes.
Otherwise, I think the tone and stuff is pretty similar. It'd be interesting to rewatch that. I remember watching it. I didn't enjoy it that much. From my memory. So it's not a movie that I'm really dying to get back to. So I don't think I'll watch this. Whereas this movie, I honestly see the merits of watching it again. I think there is some they convey the emotions in this movie really well. I think like you really feel for the times each of the characters going through things. Like even small characters, like I think it's Asif Ali's character when he sort of had the fight with his wife or something like that, and at the end we see them come together. She's been sick and then she comes back or something like that. So it's been like, when I think Sarah, the one, she's one of the patients that survive from the doctor, and how emotional he is when he sees her. So they convey emotions, I think, really well in this movie, which I can't recall too well if Contagion did that. But I definitely will remember this movie, whereas I don't remember Contagion. So, all that well. So that's the one thing. I don't know. I might have been a minority. It might have been also, I watched it before COVID. Might have been a few factors that might have to come to play.
Yeah.
But overall, look, both pretty serious movies. And Marginal Call is another interesting one. If you're interested to watch more movies that take that really realistic approach and you're looking for ones, that's about the global financial crisis. But man, we'll move on to some sort of, while this movie was really good, I did enjoy a lot of it. There were some criticisms and I did want to sort of speak on them. But how about you, man? What sort of did you think about this movie that were a bit sort of drawbacks? Because I think we both agree we like this movie. And I don't want to use the word criticism like, in a way that like it's done badly. I think the criticisms come about of making a movie like this and the challenges that are presented when you're so tied to sort of your ambition to keep this real. But what did you think about sort of the stuff they did in this movie?
Look, I'm interested to hear your point about the kind of trying to keep the realism here. I think for me, potentially the drawback here is just the length of the film. It is a solid 2.5 hours, I think.
Yes.
And the film starts off really strong. I really loved all the work in terms of establishing what the hospital environment is, first patient coming in, them solving kind of the virus and how it all came to be. I think the middle part of the film just lulls a little bit. You get introduced to a lot of characters and their backstories. And then the Shobin Shahir character comes and he kickstarts the movie again with a terrific performance, which you need to give props to it because his performance here, being a guy who's really sick and just like the pain, I almost felt physical discomfort watching him kind of having a headache. There's a scene where he's on a stretcher and he's saying, please slow down. And then he's confused. Like I was actually uncomfortable and it was such a terrific performance. And then you learn about his backstory with this counterfeiting money scheme he's got, his relationship with his mother, him hearing that his mother hasn't touched the money that he's given her. But he really kickstarts the second part or the final chapter of this film. And it really is just action-packed in its own way from that point onwards. But that middle section of the film just drags a little bit for me. And I think if you had cut out 20 minutes from this film, it would have just been so much more tighter and tauter. And I don't think you would have diminished the film in any way. I think there are storylines in this that could have gone. And I know you like the biological attack angle, and it's good that they covered it off. But every time I heard it, I was just like, if you got rid of this, would it have diminished the movie in any way? But potentially not. But I think there are also such a panorama of characters here. I actually struggled to figure out who everyone was in relation to one another. And that could be just because we don't speak the language. So we're trying to figure out the subtitles while also watching what's going on screen. And so you will miss a couple of details here and there throughout the film. So I think the film could have just been made a little bit shorter. But at the same time, I think they were trying to capture all of these different elements that the people were dealing with at the time, whether it's the political aspect of a biological attack threat or the different characters whose lives are being impacted by this. They were trying to give a full picture of the consequences of an outbreak like this. And that was great, but I also think maybe could have just been dialed back a little bit. Not a significant criticism, man, but I think that's the only thing from my perspective I could discredit it for, but still a terrific film.
Yeah, no, I think, I did enjoy that sort of conspiracy sort of side you sort of mentioned. But you are right. If you took out that part, I don't think it would have been as well. I think it's worthwhile mentioning it and sort of acknowledging that it's there.
Yeah.
But they do spend a few scenes in that sort of room where they're talking about sort of what's happening. There's a bit of back and forth. And I did like how the journalists went enemies as well. Sort of like that. They were sort of they were just being, they had their integrity.
Very antagonistic.
Yeah, but they were like, they had to sort of, this is part of my job. I have to inquire. This is what I have to do.
I have to ask the question.
So I did appreciate that, but you are right. There are some storylines which I don't know if they needed. Like, the relationship between the doctor, as I mentioned before, they could have cut that out, for instance, if they wanted to. There's elements here or there which they could have played around with. So I think that is one. It's definitely a very legit sort of criticism that you got there. Oh, also with the language makes it difficult because with a movie that's trying to do so much with so many different characters, and trying to keep up with these different characters while reading subtitles, while seeing people. Also, sometimes I didn't know who. I think it was one time there was a character in PPE and I didn't know who it was.
I had that as well.
That was also a bit of a challenge.
I did that. Yeah. But I felt like they kept it real with that, right? Like that. This is just how it would have been at the time. But I had the similar challenge.
No, exactly. 100%. So I was like, I think that's who I think it is, but I can't be sure. Like, I can't tell by the voice that well. So that was another sort of challenge I had. But my main criticism would probably come about, and it probably just comes to the nature of this movie, man. It's just that it's exposition heavy. Like it is a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of because I mean
I should have known.
I don't know how else you would do this movie, sort of otherwise, right? Like I don't know how you can't really show without sensationalizing or having a big scene. Like, like we could have had a jet come by and showing us dropping off food supplies or dropping off rations or, something like so extreme that might have been, eye catching. But that's not the point of this movie. So
no, it'd be out of context.
Like if they did something like Shobi's character is there for that boost of energy. And I think it's important because otherwise it does get a little bit hard to sort of sustain. And there were characters like that, during even COVID. So it's good to acknowledge those kind of characters.
It's true.
So it definitely made sense in the context of the movie. But that's probably my main criticism. That the two is one that they've packed in a lot, and I don't know if they could have taken out one or two sort of storylines or subplots and just focus on, maybe if it's like 15, 20 kind of minutes. I think it's just a little bit longer than it has to be. And I think the challenges, and it's the same criticism I had with Contagion or even Marginal Call. They're both of them are extremely exposition heavy, and it's not much you can do about it. So, but again, I give credit.
Because the audience can't fill in the gap of this, right? Because none of us know what the Nipah virus is or how you should deal with it. Correct. So the balance is so hard to strike. You're right.
Yeah, you have to explain what this is and how serious it is, and what's the best way to do that. It is unfortunately just explaining it. Like, they did a good job of showing the actual physical impacts, but how else do you sort of talk about, it's got an infection rate of this much? You have to just deliver it and tell it. It hasn't been told to us.
Yes.
So there are early criticisms for this movie, but overall, man, I don't think there were too much that I struggled with. I will say, like, coming into this movie, like, I think it's good to be a bit equipped to know what you're coming into. I think if you take it, honestly, watching this movie, sometimes I felt like I was watching a documentary. Like, it felt like that. It had more that kind of vibe than a sort of movie. It felt like a documentary because they're showing us the experiences of what it takes to sort of trace some of, the index patient down, or what it takes to get supplies, or what it takes to navigate through this terrain when there's Nipah around. So, if you're coming with that mindset, I think it's okay. But credit to, the audience for just sort of lapping this movie up and making it one of the most successful movies, because there's no way a movie like this would have been this successful, as we've said, in Hollywood. It just doesn't work.
No. No, that's right. That's right. Dude, before I forget, there's another element of this film that I really enjoyed, and that was the music to this. Yeah. It was, I think, really worked well to create a sense of tension and heightened stakes, because there's not a whole lot going on in this film that is tense when you think about it. It's people sitting around a room trying to figure out things, looking at videos. There's no a hunt for a person or big action scenes. So you got to keep the audience entertained. And I think the music or the score to this is a terrific accompaniment to this film, because it just heightens the conversations. It just gives you that additional bit of tenseness to what is going on. And like the music itself, it was like this very synthetic buzzing sounds. There was like almost fast heartbeat type music. Very inorganic sounds that's very reminiscent of like a thriller movie, and also reminded me weirdly of like Christopher Nolan's like Inception or Tenet, because it's very like just loud, like very, synthetic sounds. And I really noticed it, and I thought it was very obvious, but I thought it was a necessary part of elevating this movie and keeping the excitement up, especially when you have a slightly longer runtime as well. So I thought the music to this, absolutely superb, man.
Yeah, no, production-wise, it's, again, another really well done movie.
Oh, yeah. You've almost just taken it for granted at this point, right?
I hadn't noticed how much of the like score, not necessarily like, songs and stuff like that, because there's no songs in this, obviously, and that's they really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes that much sense. But really, the score is really good in this. It is for that pulsating, like synth music that happens. It sounds like almost like a hospital, like, some of the machinery that's sort of going around the...
Oh, yeah, good point. That whizzing sound. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. It does a great job of lulling you in at times. And it's another really high production movie. And so before we continue on, man, I've got to give a special mention to obviously one of our oldest and most, one of our biggest helpers, really, man. Ken, thank you a lot, because you recommended this movie to me quite a while ago, and it was one that always had my interest, but I'm glad we did it now because we just got to see so many of these faces. So thank you, mate. Really appreciate it.
Familiar faces. Appreciate it, mate. Thanks.
100%, another one like that. But yeah, man, I think we've talked about this movie quite a bit. I think we've gone through, basically a lens as to what we liked about this movie. But that brings us to the D scale. I'm going to be interested to hear what you sort of give this as your final rating, man, because I think it's not as clear cut, despite us both really liking this movie. It's sort of not a run. It's probably not a runaway, and that's probably got a lot to do with just the fact that of the genre. But yeah, man, where does this fall in your D scale? What's your final rating?
Look, man, this is getting a dynamite for me. This is maybe on the lower end of the dynamite, but a dynamite nonetheless, because I was thoroughly entertained by this film. Thriller, medical drama. Haven't come across that genre before. Who knew I would enjoy it as much as I did? And I think an ensemble cast here that everyone delivers on this and portrays characters that they haven't really done before. So it was thoroughly enjoyable. Loved the kind of procedural element of trying to figure out this virus. And of course, I think the experience of this film post-COVID would be so different to what it was before COVID. And I think it's a timely opportunity to watch this film, and it just resonates so much more with me. And I just really loved the direction of this. It was handled in a very sincere, genuine, understated way that I really appreciated, without any of the sensationalism. And while it might not matter to other people, I think the directors and the people involved really tried to pay homage to the people involved on the front line in trying to deal with this and deal with it respectfully as well. And I think they succeeded in creating an entertaining film that is also very respectful as well. So I don't know if Hollywood could do it as good as this. So I enjoyed this film, and a couple of drawbacks, but it does not enough for me to not recommend this to people, because I think this is an excellent film.
No, I'm basically around the same, man. I think it's an interesting point on the ensemble cast, because when I think about, like, if this ensemble cast wasn't there, I think this movie would have struggled a little bit more. If it was sort of an independent kind of movie, it would be like, who are you going to get to really pull this? And maybe that's why it got many people involved, because everyone was just like, look, I'm happy to sort of chip into this kind of movie because how much it means to the people. So I don't know if that's there, but look, I'm probably around the same boat. Again, it's not really my type of movie, I would say. Like, it's definitely not a movie I'm going to like watch all the time or anything like that. I think it's good to watch these movies every now and then, but I couldn't watch.
It's too triggering, man. You can't go back to this every year.
No, it's definitely after COVID, it gives you some perspective, but it makes you reflect on probably a darker time, and that's that's COVID. People who went through Nipah, this would have been even worse. Like it would have been
true,
even more triggering, I think. But look, I really enjoyed all the performances. There's a lot to see in this movie, and again, I think it tells a really good and important story that we should all sort of understand and see. Because again, even though we lived through COVID, we didn't get any of these insights. You don't get it through press releases, or news articles, or anything like that. We don't get that at all. So a movie like this really contains it all together and puts it out there for
yes.
the commercial audience to sort of watch as an entertainment piece as well. So yeah, man, it's probably around a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, I would say.
Yeah,
really, really enjoyable. A few drawbacks, but look, I understand what they were trying to do, so I can appreciate sort of some of their criticisms.
Yes.
I can sort of understand.
Yes,
I can at least have some sympathy for why they sort of did what they did.
Yes,
but yeah, man, this was a great conversation. I'm happy we did this movie. It's definitely the most unique movie we've done. I feel like I say that.
Yeah,
I feel like I say that too much. So maybe not. Maybe we just always do different ones. But this one, at least, it was not a thriller. There was no. I mean, it was a thriller, but there was no action.
No,
there was no comedy. There was. It was just complete. Straight laced, matter of fact. So yeah.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. I reckon it is unique, man. Yeah. And we haven't done something like this, nor tackled a subject matter in the way that this film tackled a subject matter. So
that's true.
Very unique and thoroughly enjoyable, man.
Yeah, cool. Well, let us know in the comments, like always, what you guys thought of this movie. Awesome. We'd love to know, what you guys thought, because, it's a different time altogether. Still sort of wrapping my head around the fact that, we've gone through COVID and now watched a movie like this. But
and I think they just declared the COVID pandemic over 2 weeks ago,
really?
Or a week ago. The WHO. Yeah. They just officially said the pandemic is over.
Oh, yeah,
so
perfect time to reflect then.
Very timely opportunity.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
But Sonny, like always, man, this was always awesome. So, yeah, man.
Always a pleasure, man.
We'll catch you guys in the next one.
Let's do it again soon.
See you guys.
Catch you guys. Bye.